Dress like a duchess, or stay home. Duke Alistair spoke loudly enough for every servant in the courtyard to hear. Before him stood his wife, Genevieve, dressed not in the blue silk gown he had selected, but in fitted riding leathers beneath a soot-stained wool coat. Her boots were made for factory floors, and her gloves still carried traces of machine oil from the night she had spent working in secret. In less than 2 hours, Lord Vance, the industrialist whose contract could rescue Iron Ridge from financial ruin, would arrive at the Oakenford exhibition. Alistair believed elegance, tradition, and his ducal title would secure the bargain. Genevieve knew only a working invention could. Without asking his permission, she mounted her stallion and rode ahead, carrying a miniature steam forge constructed from her late father's engineering notebooks. If the machine performed as she intended, it would prove that Iron Ridge could regulate furnace pressure while using far less coal than any competing foundry. But when she reached the exhibition and opened the leather case, her confidence turned cold. A fresh scratch ran across the brass pressure valve. One of its retaining pins had been loosened, and a page containing the final calculations had been carefully cut from her father's notebook. Someone had tampered with her invention. When Alistair arrived and saw the crowd gathering around his wife, Genevieve caught something unsettling in his expression. It was not merely anger, it was fear, and she could not yet tell whether he feared that her machine would fail or that she would succeed without him. Genevieve closed her fingers around the damaged valve before anyone else could see it. "Your Grace." The stable lad who had helped carry her case into the pavilion stood beside her, waiting for instructions. The exhibition hall was already filling with foundry owners and investors. Demonstration hammers rang beneath the iron rafters, while steam hissed from the surrounding machines. Lord Vance could arrive at any moment. Genevieve closed her hand around the damaged valve. She could not accuse anyone without evidence, but she would not allow her invention to fail before men already convinced that a duchess could not have built it. Genevieve could not accuse anyone without evidence, nor could she allow the machine to fail before the very men who already believed a duchess incapable of building it. "Find me a narrow steel pin," she said, "no longer than your smallest finger, and bring a file." The boy stared at the opened mechanism. "Has something broken?" "Not yet." He hurried away. Genevieve removed the loosened retaining pin and examined it beneath the nearest lamp. Someone had filed one side almost through, leaving only a thin strip of metal to hold the pressure valve in place. Once the miniature boiler reached full heat, the pin would snap. Steam would escape through the housing. The regulating arm would collapse, and her invention would appear dangerously flawed. It was not careless damage. It had been prepared by someone who understood exactly how the machine worked. She looked across the hall. Engineers, porters, and servants moved constantly around the pavilion. In the confusion, anyone could have approached her case, but only someone who understood pressure machinery would have known exactly which pin to weaken. Then she saw her husband. Alistair stood beneath the archway beside Lord Vance, immaculate in a black morning coat and silver waistcoat. He looked precisely as a duke receiving an important guest was expected to look: controlled, distinguished, and entirely certain of his authority. His gaze found Genevieve almost immediately. It moved from her riding boots to the tools spread across her workbench. His mouth tightened. For one fleeting moment, the expression resembled the anger she had seen in the courtyard. But beneath it lay something more complicated. Fear, certainly, perhaps even shame. Lord Vance followed his gaze. "Is that the Duchess of Iron Ridge?" Alistair could no longer pretend she had remained at home. "My wife has developed an interest in mechanical design," he answered. Even from across the pavilion, Genevieve heard the word interest. It reduced 12 months of work, a lifetime beside her father's drafting table, and 3 sleepless nights of calculations, to the harmless amusement of a noblewoman with too much leisure. She felt the old temptation to remain silent. It had preserved the peace throughout 18 months of marriage. She had allowed Alistair to speak for the estate, for their household, and eventually for her, because correcting him always produced the same cold distance between them. But silence would not repair the damaged valve. It would not save Iron Ridge, and it would never make him see her. The stable lad returned with a pin and file. Genevieve measured the replacement against the broken piece, shortened it, and smoothed its edges. Her hands remained steady, although Lord Vance was now approaching the workbench with Alistair half a step behind him. "Duchess," Vance said, studying the brass mechanism. Your husband tells me you have an interest in machinery. Genevieve inserted the new pin. My husband is being modest on my behalf. A few of the surrounding engineers turned at her answer. Alistair's eyes warned her not to continue. She continued. My father was Edmund Harcourt. He designed pressure systems for naval foundries and spent his final years attempting to reduce the coal wasted by traditional forge bellows. This model is based upon his work, though the regulating mechanism is mine. Recognition sharpened Vance's expression. Harcourt designed the Portsmouth relief valve. He did. I was told his final designs were lost after his death. They were inherited, Genevieve replied. There is a difference. For the first time, Vance smiled. Alistair did not. Genevieve sealed the valve housing and set the miniature furnace on its iron stand. Before igniting it, she looked toward her husband. If you would prefer that I stop, Your Grace, say so now. The challenge passed between them in full view of the gathering crowd. Alistair could command her to close the case. As her husband and the legal head of Iron Ridge, he could remove her from the exhibition. He could insist that Vance discuss the contract only with him, but to silence her now would mean admitting that he feared what she might prove. His jaw tightened. Proceed. One word. Spoken like permission. Genevieve accepted it only because she intended it to be the last permission she required. She opened the fuel line and struck the ignition flint. A small blue flame awakened beneath the copper boiler. Within moments, the water began to tremble. Steam entered the narrow pipe and drove the first piston forward. The miniature bellows opened, then closed. A murmur passed through the spectators. Traditional forge bellows required constant human effort and consumed coal unevenly. Genevieve's mechanism measured the pressure of the steam and adjusted the airflow automatically, keeping the flame hot without allowing it to surge. She increased the fuel. The brass needle climbed across the pressure gauge. The replacement pin held, but the damaged assembly gave a faint metallic click. Genevieve heard it. No one else seemed to. She rested 2 fingers against the control lever and reduced the secondary intake before the pressure could reach the weakened joint. The needle steadied. The bellows continued moving with slow, mechanical precision. Lord Vance leaned closer. How much coal would this save in a full-sized furnace? Between 18 and 22%, depending upon the quality of the fuel. That is an extraordinary claim. It is a measured result. One of the foundry owners gave a dismissive laugh. Lord Marchmont was a heavy man, with a flushed face and a silver-headed cane he carried, despite having no difficulty walking. A charming exhibition, he said. But a table model proves very little. A lady's calculations may behave prettily in brass. They are less obedient when surrounded by molten iron. Several men laughed with him. Genevieve recognized his name. Marchmont controlled the second-largest forge in the county and had spent months pursuing the same contract Alistair wanted from Vance. She also noticed a dark smear across the cuff of his right glove. Not soot. Graphite grease, the same compound she used inside the valve housing. Then perhaps you should examine the calculations yourself, she said. Marchmont's smile faltered. She opened her father's notebook and turned it toward him. The severed edge of the missing page remained visible near the binding. I would particularly value your opinion on the final pressure ratio. His gaze dropped to the cut paper, only for an instant, but it was long enough. Marchmont recovered quickly. I have no habit of inspecting unfinished work. Nor do I. Genevieve closed the notebook. Lord Vance's attention moved between them. Is there a difficulty with the design? There has been an attempt to create one, Genevieve said. Alistair stepped forward. Genevieve. This time, her name carried a warning. She reached beneath the workbench and placed the damaged retaining pin on the white cloth covering the table. The filed edge caught the lamplight. This pin was intact when I packed the machine before dawn. I discovered it moments ago, cut almost completely through. Had I ignited the forge without examining the valve, it would have failed under pressure. The amusement vanished from the surrounding faces. Vance picked up the pin, but did not touch its damaged edge. You believe someone here sabotaged it? I believe metal does not file itself. Marchmont struck the floor once with his cane. This is absurd. The woman arrives dressed like a stable hand, nearly breaks her own toy, and now intends to accuse respectable gentlemen to conceal her carelessness. Genevieve looked directly at his stained cuff. I have accused no one, Lord Marchmont. Not yet. No, she agreed. Not yet. Alistair moved beside her. For one hopeful second, she believed he had noticed Marchmont's reaction and meant to defend her. Instead, he lowered his voice. End the demonstration. We will discuss this privately. If I stop now, everyone in this hall will believe Lord Marchmont. This is no longer about the machine. It was never only about the machine. Their eyes met. Genevieve saw the choice before him as clearly as if it had been written into a contract. He could stand beside his wife while she exposed an act of sabotage, or he could protect his pride and the comfort of men whose approval mattered more to him than her word. Lord Vance waited. So did the entire pavilion. Alistair looked at the damaged pin, then at Marchmont, and finally at Genevieve. His expression became unreadable. The Duchess will complete her demonstration, he announced. Marchmont's face darkened. Genevieve had scarcely released the breath in her chest when a messenger pushed through the spectators. The young man wore the grey coat of an Iron Ridge depot rider. Mud covered his boots, and blood had dried along one side of his forehead. "Your Grace," he said, struggling to breathe. "There has been an accident on the Northern Coal Road." Alistair caught his arm before he could collapse. "What happened?" "3 wagons overturned near Black Hollow. Their wheel pins were cut. The road is blocked, and the remaining drivers have refused to continue." Genevieve stared at the damaged pin on the table. A forge valve, 3 wagon wheels, different pieces of iron, weakened in precisely the same way. The messenger swallowed and looked toward her. "There is more, Your Grace. We found written orders in the lead wagon. They say the coal shipment was inspected and approved before departure." He pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. At the bottom of the page, pressed deeply into black wax, was the unmistakable crest of Iron Ridge, Alistair's seal, and above it stood Genevieve's name. Genevieve did not reach for the paper. For several seconds, she simply stared at her name written above the Duke's seal, while the sounds of the exhibition seemed to recede around her. Alistair took the document from the messenger and read it once, then again, his expression hardening with every line. The order stated that the Northern coal shipment had been inspected under the authority of the Duchess of Iron Ridge and cleared to proceed despite concerns about the wagon fittings. It even claimed that Genevieve had personally approved the wheel pins after examining them at the estate workshop. "I have never seen this document," she said. Alistair raised his eyes to hers. "It carries the Iron Ridge seal. Then your seal has been used without your knowledge, or with it." A murmur moved through the surrounding men. Genevieve heard Lord Marchmont draw a slow breath behind her, as though savouring the damage. Alistair's face changed at her accusation, not with guilt, but with wounded authority. "Be careful, Genevieve. 3 wagons have overturned. A machine was sabotaged, and my name has been placed on an order I did not write. Caution is no longer our greatest need." Lord Vance stepped between them before Alistair could respond. "How many men were injured?" he asked the messenger. "4, my lord. 1 is trapped beneath the lead wagon. The drivers tried to lift it, but the road has collapsed along the ditch. They sent me ahead for chains and horses." Genevieve closed the lid of her machine case. "How far is Black Hollow?" "Less than 6 miles if we take the ridge path." She pulled on her gloves. Alistair caught her wrist before she could move. "You are not going." The words were quiet, but every man close enough heard them. Genevieve looked down at his hand and then back at his face. "One of our men is trapped beneath a wagon carrying nearly 3 tons of coal, which is precisely why this is no place for you. I understand wagon bracing better than half the drivers on that road. My father designed the lifting frame used at our foundry. If the wagon is lying against a broken bank, ordinary chains may pull it sideways and crush the man beneath it. The estate foreman will manage." The estate foreman approved the wheel pins that were cut. That silenced him. Genevieve gently but firmly removed his hand from her wrist. "You told me to dress like a duchess or stay home. I chose neither. Do not ask me now to behave like an ornament while one of our workers dies beneath an order bearing my name." She turned to the messenger. "Have Ferris brought to the east gate. Collect 2 lifting chains, 4 timber wedges, and the exhibition's portable screw jack." The young man hesitated, looking toward Alistair for confirmation. The hesitation hurt more than Genevieve expected. Even now, Fort Modgin, the Tariache, with her name forged and her judgment proven, every order she gave remained suspended until her husband allowed it. Alistair saw it too. His gaze moved from the messenger to the damaged pin on the table, and finally to Lord Marchmont's faintly satisfied face. "Do as the Duchess says," he ordered, "and saddle my horse as well." Lord Marchmont stepped forward. "Surely, your Grace does not intend to abandon Lord Vance in the middle of a contractual exhibition over a common road accident." "A common accident does not usually carry my seal," Alistair replied. "Nor does it begin with 3 wheel pins cut in the same fashion as the pin inside my wife's machine." Marchmont's fingers tightened around the head of his cane. "You cannot mean to connect the two based upon the suspicions of a woman desperate to protect her reputation." Genevieve lifted the damaged pin from the table and wrapped it in the white cloth. "My reputation does not need protecting from the truth, Lord Marchmont. Does yours?" His face reddened. Before he could answer, Vance addressed Genevieve. "If you leave now, your demonstration remains incomplete. A contract can be discussed tomorrow. A man beneath a wagon may not have until then." Something like approval entered Vance's sharp eyes. "Then I shall come with you." Alistair appeared startled. "The road will be dangerous, my lord. I have invested in enough foundries to know that the character of an estate is revealed more clearly during a crisis than at an exhibition table. If Iron Ridge expects my business, I should like to see how it treats the men whose hands produce its iron." Within minutes, the 3 of them were riding toward Black Hollow, accompanied by the messenger and 2 exhibition labourers, driving a cart loaded with chains, timber, and the heavy screwjack. Genevieve kept Ferris at a hard pace. Alistair rode beside her, but said nothing until the exhibition buildings had disappeared behind the ridge. "Did you truly believe I might have written that order?" he asked. She kept her eyes on the road. "I believe I do not know what you are willing to do when your authority feels threatened." The answer struck him. She saw it in the tightening of his hands around the reins. "I would never endanger our workers to silence you. This morning you cared more about my coat than the machine inside my case. At the exhibition, you described my life's work as an interest. When the messenger presented a forged order, your first response was to remind me that it carried your seal. Because that seal is kept in my locked study, then someone with access to your study is using your authority against us." "Against you," Alistair corrected quietly. Genevieve looked at him. "The damaged valve, the forged approval, your name placed above my seal, they are not merely attacks upon Iron Ridge. Someone wishes to make you appear brilliant enough to interfere and foolish enough to cause disaster." It was the first time he had spoken the truth without defending himself first. "And if the accusation succeeds," she said, "you can distance the estate from me, cancel my role in Vance's contract, and preserve your standing before the county." Alistair's face went still. "Is that what you believe I would do?" "I believe someone else is certain you will." Neither spoke again. They smelled the spilled coal before they saw the wagons. Black dust hung over the hollow, mixing with the damp air and settling across the hedges like mourning cloth. The lead wagon lay on its side near the collapsed edge of the road. One rear wheel had broken free and rolled into the ditch. The second wagon had struck it from behind, while the third had overturned across the road, trapping the remaining drivers on the northern side. Men shouted around the wreckage, but their efforts lacked coordination. Each time they pulled at the lead wagon, the damaged bank crumbled farther beneath it. "Stop the horses!" Genevieve called as she dismounted. "If you pull from that angle, the wagon will slide into the ditch." A broad-shouldered foreman turned toward her, his face streaked with coal dust. "Your Grace, we have a man beneath the axle." "I know. Is he conscious?" "Barely." A weak cry came from beneath the wagon, followed by the groan of timber shifting against earth. Genevieve dropped to one knee and looked under the frame. A young driver lay pinned from the waist down, protected from the wagon's full weight only by a broken section of the side rail. Blood darkened his trousers, but his chest still moved. "What is his name?" she asked. "Samuel Pike." "Samuel, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. "Yes, Your Grace. We are going to lift the wagon, but you must not try to pull yourself free until I tell you. Do you understand?" He managed the smallest nod. Genevieve examined the ground, the angle of the axle, and the fractured bank. The wagon could not be raised from the roadside alone. It needed to be braced from below before the screwjack took its weight. Otherwise, the wet earth would collapse and send the entire load down upon Samuel. She began directing the men to unload coal from the upper side, one basket at a time, while the timber wedges were driven beneath the frame. Alistair removed his coat and joined them without waiting to be asked. Lord Vance did the same, to the astonishment of his attendants. For 20 minutes, no one spoke except to relay Genevieve's instructions. Sweat ran down her back despite the cold. Each groan of the timber reminded her that one miscalculation could kill the man below. When half the coal had been removed, she crawled close enough to inspect the axle. A metal pin remained lodged inside the wheel housing. It had not snapped beneath the wagon's weight. It had been cut cleanly on both sides. Genevieve eased it free and held it beside the damaged valve pin she had brought from the exhibition. The file marks ran at the same angle. 3 short strokes on one side, 2 deeper strokes on the other. The same hand had damaged both. "Alistair," she called. He knelt beside her. She placed the 2 pieces of metal in his palm. He needed no engineering education to recognize the matching cuts. "This was deliberate," he said. "Yes, but the person who filed them made a mistake. The machine pin is brass. The wagon pin is hardened iron. A common workshop file would leave different marks on each. Yet these cuts are nearly identical." He looked at her, waiting. "A diamond-edged file," she explained. "Small enough for precision work, strong enough to score iron. They are expensive and rarely used outside instrument making." Lord Vance, standing behind them, heard her. Marchmont displayed precision gauges at his pavilion, and every one of his engineers carries such a file, Genevieve said. "That proves opportunity, not guilt. Then, we find the person who used it." The rescue required another half-hour. When Genevieve finally gave the order, 6 men turned the screw jack, while Alistair and Vance held the stabilizing ropes. The wagon rose inch by inch. Timber complained under the shifting load. The broken bank crumbled, but the wedges held. "Now," Genevieve shouted. 2 drivers crawled beneath the frame and pulled Samuel free. The moment his body cleared the axle, the lower wedge split. The wagon lurched toward Genevieve. Alistair dropped the rope and seized her around the waist, dragging her backward as the screwjack collapsed. The wagon crashed into the ditch with a roar of timber and coal. For a heartbeat, Genevieve could hear nothing but Alistair's breathing against her ear. His arms remained locked around her. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No. You might have been crushed. So might Samuel." She looked toward the rescued driver, who was being carried to the roadside. But he was not. Alistair released her slowly. His hands trembled before he closed them into fists. Whatever he wanted to say remained trapped behind his fear. Genevieve bent to retrieve the 2 cut pins, but the white cloth in which she had wrapped the first one was no longer where she had placed it. She searched the mud beside the broken jack, then beneath the discarded chains. "What is it?" Alistair asked. "The valve pin. You gave it to me. I gave you both pins. You placed them on the timber crate before the lift." They turned together. The crate remained beside the road, but the 2 pieces of evidence were gone. One of the laborers from the exhibition was also missing. The messenger mounted at once and rode back along the ridge path, while Alistair sent the foreman in the opposite direction to alert the estate gates. Genevieve stood beside the abandoned crate, anger burning through her exhaustion. They had possessed their first clear connection between the sabotage at Oakenford and the wreck at Black Hollow. Now it had vanished, because she had allowed the evidence out of her hands. "I should have secured it," she said. "We were lifting a wagon off a dying man," Alistair replied. "You could not do both. Someone expected us to be distracted." Lord Vance approached, carrying the forged order. "Then perhaps they expected this paper to be lost as well." He handed it to Genevieve. "I took the liberty of keeping it inside my coat." Genevieve examined the seal more closely now that they stood beneath open daylight. At first glance, it was unmistakably the crest of Iron Ridge, a crowned stag above 3 iron bars, but the wax had filled the design unevenly. One of the stag's antlers ended in a rounded point instead of the sharp fork engraved into Alistair's signet. It was not his seal. It was a copy made by someone who had seen it, but had never held the original long enough to study its smallest details. "This impression came from a counterfeit matrix," she said. "Who has seen your signet closely?" Alistair's expression darkened. "Half the county has seen me use it." "Seen it, yes, but someone had to copy its dimensions." He looked again at the paper. "My steward sent the signet to Oakenford 3 months ago, when the clasp cracked. It was repaired by a metal worker, employed inside Marchmont's South Forge." Lord Vance's face hardened. "Then Marchmont had access." "For 2 days," Alistair said. "Long enough to make an impression." Genevieve turned the document over. A faint number had been written near the lower edge, almost concealed beneath the fold. 27BH. Not a date, not a page number. It resembled a delivery reference. Black Hollow, she said. The letters identify this road. 27 may be the shipment entry. Alistair understood immediately. The depot ledger. If the false order matched an entry in Iron Ridge's official ledger, then the conspiracy had already reached inside their estate. Someone with access to the records had prepared the forgery, redirected the wagons, and ensured the damaged shipment travelled through Black Hollow. The missing labourer might have carried away the pins, but he could not have altered a ledger locked inside the Duke's own office. Genevieve looked toward the southern road, where Iron Ridge lay beyond the hills. We must reach the estate before whoever wrote this realizes Samuel survived. Why would his survival matter? Vance asked. From the roadside came Samuel's weak voice. Because I saw him. Everyone turned. The injured driver had forced himself upright against the folded coat supporting his back. His face was grey with pain. Genevieve hurried to him and knelt. Saw whom? Samuel swallowed with difficulty. The gentleman who inspected the wagons. He came before dawn wearing an Iron Ridge coat. Told us the Duchess had ordered new pins fitted. Did you know him? Alistair asked. No, Your Grace. But when he climbed into his carriage, I saw the crest painted on the door. Samuel closed his eyes, fighting to remain conscious. It was not Lord Marchmont's crest. Genevieve leaned closer. Whose was it? The driver opened his eyes again and looked directly at Alistair. It was yours. For one long moment, no one spoke. The silence around the wreckage seemed heavier than the overturned wagons. Alistair's ducal crest was painted on every official carriage belonging to Iron Ridge, but only 4 such vehicles were kept at the estate. Each was locked inside the carriage house at night, and every departure was supposed to be recorded by the head coachman. Which carriage did you see? Alistair asked. Samuel's breathing had grown shallow, yet he forced himself to answer. A black travelling carriage, Your Grace. Gold crest on the door. One rear lamp was cracked. The gentleman sat inside, while another man changed the pins. Alistair turned to Genevieve. The western carriage has a cracked rear lamp. Who used it last? I did, 3 days ago, when I met Marchmont's representatives at Stonehaven. A fresh unease passed through her. If the carriage had been taken from Iron Ridge, the saboteur had not merely copied Alistair's seal. He had entered the Duke's carriage house, used an official vehicle, and known precisely when the northern wagons would depart. The conspiracy was being directed from inside their home. Samuel must be moved before we question him further, Genevieve said. Send him to the physician in Oakenford, not the estate infirmary. Alistair understood her caution. You believe he may be in danger at Iron Ridge. Someone stole the pins while we were rescuing him. Whoever arranged this knows he survived. Until we discover whom we can trust, he should remain beyond our gates. Lord Vance offered his own carriage and 2 attendants to escort Samuel. Before they lifted the injured driver, Genevieve took his hand. The man who spoke to you, what did he look like? Samuel closed his eyes, searching through the pain. Tall, grey coat, kept his hat low. He spoke like a gentleman, but one hand was burned across the knuckles. Genevieve's thoughts returned to the exhibition, to the men gathered around her machine, and the graphite grease staining Marchmont's glove. Did you see the hand clearly, when he gave me the order? The burn crossed his right thumb. Samuel's grip weakened. He wore a silver ring, shaped like a serpent. Lord Vance reacted first. Marchmont's chief engineer wears such a ring. Silas Reed. I saw it when he demonstrated their measuring instruments this morning. The name was unfamiliar to Genevieve, but Alistair's face showed recognition. Reed once worked at Iron Ridge, he said. My father dismissed him after a furnace accident, killed 2 apprentices. Then he knows the estate, the carriage house, and the foundry machinery. Genevieve replied. He may also know where your seal was sent for repair, and he has reason to hate this house. Hatred may explain why he agreed to the sabotage. It does not explain who gave him access last night. They left Lord Vance's attendants to care for Samuel and rode toward Iron Ridge at a punishing pace. The sky had darkened by the time the estate's stone towers appeared beyond the valley. Smoke rose steadily from the foundry chimneys, but the sight no longer reassured Genevieve. Somewhere behind those walls was a person who had opened the carriage house, altered the delivery records, and allowed Silas Reed to travel beneath the Duke's crest. It might be the steward, the head coachman, or one of the clerks who handled coal accounts. Each possibility widened the circle of betrayal. As they entered the courtyard, Alistair did not summon the household. Instead, he ordered the gates closed and instructed the porter to tell no one why they had returned. Genevieve dismounted and immediately saw an empty space inside the carriage house. "The Western carriage," she said. It had not returned. The head coachman, Mr. Bell, was brought from the stables. He was an elderly man who had served Alistair's family for more than 30 years, and genuine confusion crossed his weathered face when he saw the vacant stall. "It was here when I finished the evening inspection," he insisted. "Who holds the carriage house keys?" Alistair asked. "Myself, Your Grace, and Mr. Wren." "The steward," Genevieve said. Bell nodded. "He keeps a second key for emergencies." "Where is Mr. Wren now?" "He rode to the Southern Tenant Farms shortly after breakfast." Alistair's eyes narrowed. "I gave him no instruction to inspect the Southern Farms." Bell shifted uneasily. "He said the order came from the Duchess." Genevieve felt the pattern closing around her. Her name had approved the damaged wagon pins. Her authority had supposedly sent the steward away. Every false instruction placed her at the center of the disaster, while ensuring the true conspirators remained unseen. "Search Wren's office," Alistair ordered. Genevieve stopped him before he could call the guards. "If Wren is guilty, he may have left evidence designed for us to find. If he is innocent, someone sent him away so his office could be used." "Then what do you suggest?" "We begin with the ledger. The number on the forged order was 27. If that entry was altered, the ink may tell us when." They crossed the inner courtyard toward the administrative wing. Alistair walked beside her rather than ahead, a small change Genevieve might not have noticed that morning. At the door to the account room, they found the lock intact. Alistair opened it with his master key. Nothing inside appeared disturbed. Ledgers rested in orderly rows, correspondence lay tied with ribbon, and the estate seal book remained inside its cabinet. Genevieve found the coal ledger and turned to entry 27. The page recorded the northern shipment, the number of wagons, and the weight of their loads. At the bottom stood a sentence confirming that the wheel fittings had been inspected under the Duchess's personal direction. Her name had been copied with unsettling precision. Alistair leaned over her shoulder. "The writing resembles yours. Only to someone who has never watched me write." She pointed to the capital G. "I begin the lower curve from the left. This hand began from the right, then traced backward to imitate mine." She touched the paper carefully. The main entry had dried to a dull brown, but the forged sentence remained faintly black. "It was added later. Can you determine when?" "Not exactly, but this ink contains iron filings." Alistair looked toward the shelves. "The foundry clerk uses iron ink for shipment records. Not this kind. These particles are too coarse. They came from workshop scale mixed into ordinary writing ink to make it appear older." Genevieve closed the ledger and examined the desk. A small crescent of black residue clung to the edge of the blotting paper. When she lifted it, she found the impression of several reversed words pressed into the surface. Most were unreadable, but one name appeared clearly enough: Harcourt, her father's name. Beneath it lay the partial outline of a valve diagram. Someone had used this desk not only to forge her approval, but also to copy the missing page from her notebook. "The person who cut the design from my book brought it here," she said. "Why?" "To trace the auxiliary valve. The page they stole was not necessary to sabotage my miniature model. It described how the same mechanism could be installed inside a full-sized furnace." Alistair's expression changed. "Marchmont does not merely want Vance's contract. He wants your design." Genevieve looked at the dark residue on the blotter. "He wants both. If my machine fails publicly, I am discredited. If Iron Ridge misses its deliveries, Vance turns to another forge. Marchmont then presents my stolen valve as his own solution. And because the papers blame you, no one believes you when you accuse him." "Precisely." A floorboard creaked in the corridor. Alistair crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled open the door. A young maid stood outside holding a tray of untouched tea, her face turning pale when she saw him. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Mr. Wren, Your Grace." Genevieve and Alistair exchanged a glance. "You said the steward had ridden south this morning," Genevieve said. "He did, Your Grace. but he returned less than an hour ago. He instructed me to bring refreshments to the account room if I saw lights inside. Did he know we had returned? I do not know. The maid's hands began to tremble, making the porcelain cups rattle. Genevieve softened her voice. What is your name? Clara. Clara, did Mr. Wren enter this room today? The girl glanced toward the corridor before answering. I saw him leave it before he rode away. He was carrying a leather document case. Was he alone? Clara hesitated. No, Your Grace. A gentleman had arrived before dawn. Mr. Wren took him through the servants' entrance. Did you recognize the visitor? I never saw his face. He wore a grey coat and kept his right hand inside his pocket. The description matched Samuel's. Alistair asked where the steward had gone after returning. Clara said Wren was in his private office preparing a report. Alistair reached for the bell rope to summon guards, but Genevieve stopped him. If Wren has been working with Reed, confronting him now may warn Marchmont before we recover the carriage or the missing design. He allowed a man into my house and forged your name, or he was threatened into doing so. Either way, we need him to lead us to whoever commands him. Alistair looked toward the tea tray. Why arrange for refreshments to be brought here? Genevieve examined the pot. Its lid was warm, and steam escaped through the spout. 2 cups had been provided, although no one could have known she and Alistair would enter the account room together. She lifted the lid and immediately caught a faint, bitter scent beneath the tea leaves. Not almond, not laudanum, but something metallic and astringent. Her father had once used a similar compound to clean oxidation from brass. Swallowed in sufficient quantity, it caused violent illness. Do not touch this, she told Clara. The maid nearly dropped the tray. Genevieve set it carefully on the floor. Mr. Wren did not send tea because he expected us to be thirsty. He expected whoever found the altered ledger to drink before they could report it. Alistair's face lost all colour. He tried to poison you. Us, Genevieve corrected. There are 2 cups. For the first time since their marriage, the danger did not divide them into Duke and Duchess, authority and obedience. It placed them on the same side. Alistair looked at her with something raw and unguarded. You were right at Black Hollow. Someone believes my pride will make me turn against you. Will it? She asked quietly. The question hurt him, but she refused to withdraw it. Before he could answer, a shout rose from the courtyard, followed by the pounding of hooves against stone. Alistair went to the window. The missing Western carriage had returned through the gate at full speed. One rear lamp was cracked, and the gold crest of Iron Ridge gleamed upon its black door. The driver abandoned the box before the horses had fully stopped and ran toward the servants' passage. Guards seized him near the archway. When they dragged him into the courtyard, Genevieve recognized the exhibition labourer who had disappeared with the 2 damaged pins. Alistair ordered him brought inside, but the man began shouting before he reached the steps. The Duchess paid me, he cried. She gave me the carriage and ordered the wagons destroyed. I have proof inside my coat. A guard pulled out a leather purse heavy with sovereigns and a folded letter bearing Genevieve's copied signature. The servants gathered around the courtyard, stared up at her window. Their suspicion was immediate. Alistair's was not. He looked from the false letter to Genevieve, and then did the one thing she had not expected. He descended the steps, stood before the entire household, and placed himself between his wife and her accuser. Lock that man in the gatehouse, he commanded. No one questions him without the Duchess present. The labourer struggled against the guards. Your Grace, she is deceiving you. Alistair's voice carried across the courtyard. My wife warned me that someone would use my authority to destroy her. I will not help you complete the task. Genevieve stood motionless at the window. The words did not erase what he had done that morning, nor the 18 months in which he had treated her intelligence as an inconvenience, but they marked the first time he had chosen her publicly when believing her carried a cost. Then Clara screamed behind them. Genevieve turned. The door to the account room was closing. The poisoned tea had vanished, and through the narrowing gap she glimpsed a burned right hand, wearing a silver serpent ring. Genevieve reached the door first, but Silas Reed threw his weight against it from the corridor. The heavy oak panel struck her shoulder and sent her backward into the account table. Alistair caught the door before it closed completely, Jasher, and forced his arm through the gap. Reed slammed it again, trapping Alistair's hand against the frame, but the Duke did not release his grip. Take Clara and get behind the desk, he ordered. Genevieve ignored him. She seized the brass fire tongs from beside the grate, drove their narrow end into the opening, and twisted with both hands. The gap widened, just enough for Alistair to wrench the door inward. Reed stood on the other side, holding the missing tea tray in one hand and a small pistol in the other. The silver serpent ring on his burned hand caught the light. "Move away from the door," he said. Clara stifled a cry. Alistair stepped in front of Genevieve, but Reed's pistol shifted toward the account ledgers stacked behind them. "I did not come for your wife, your grace. Not this time. Give me the coal ledger and the blotting sheet. You entered my home, poisoned tea intended for my wife, and placed her name on orders that nearly killed 4 men, Alistair said. You will leave with nothing." Reed laughed without amusement. "Still performing authority even after it has been taken from you. Marchmont understood you perfectly. He said all we needed to do was let the Duchess shine in public, and your pride would finish the work for us." Alistair did not react, but Genevieve saw the words land. They had been designed to provoke him into turning on her even now. "If Marchmont trusted your plan," she said, stepping out from behind her husband, "why are you here destroying the proof yourself?" Reed's attention moved to her. "Because plans change when foolish labourers allow witnesses to survive, or because Marchmont intends to sacrifice you once he has my design." The pistol remained steady, yet something tightened around Reed's mouth. Genevieve continued before he could silence her. "He will claim you acted alone to avenge your dismissal from Iron Ridge. The false seal, the stolen carriage, and your knowledge of our foundry all point to you. By tomorrow, Lord Marchmont will be an innocent employer horrified by the crimes of his engineer. Be quiet. You cut the pins. You copied the valve drawing. You came here for the ledger because it proves someone inside this house helped you. Marchmont will keep the contract, my invention and his reputation. You will keep the gallows." Reed's eyes flicked toward the blotting sheet. It was the smallest distraction, but Alistair moved at once. He struck the pistol aside as it fired. The shot shattered the upper window, spraying glass across the room. Reed hurled the tea tray toward Genevieve and ran. She turned her face as the pot broke against the wall, spilling its bitter contents across the carpet. Alistair chased Reed into the corridor, while guards rushed up the main stairs. For several seconds, Genevieve heard boots, a shouted order, and the crash of furniture. Then a second gunshot echoed from the servants' passage. She ran after them. Reed had reached the narrow gallery above the foundry courtyard. One guard lay wounded near the stairwell, clutching his thigh. Alistair stood at the opposite end of the gallery, blocking the route to the main hall, while 2 more guards approached from below. Trapped between them, Reed climbed onto the stone balustrade. 30 feet beneath him, workers and servants scattered across the courtyard. "There is nowhere left to go," Alistair said. Reed looked down at the drop and then toward the sloping roof of the carriage house. "There is always somewhere to go if a man no longer cares what breaks beneath him." He jumped. His body struck the edge of the lower roof, rolled across the tiles, and disappeared behind the carriage house. By the time the guards reached the yard, a saddled horse was already racing through the service gate. Reed had planned his escape before entering the house. Alistair ordered riders after him, but Genevieve knew they would not catch a man who had chosen his path in advance. She returned to the account room and found the blotting sheet gone. In the confusion, Reed had either taken it or thrown it from the gallery. The poisoned tea had soaked into the carpet, leaving too little to preserve safely, and the pistol ball had destroyed the shelf containing the duplicate carriage records. Once again, their most direct evidence had vanished. What remained was the forged order held by Lord Vance, the altered ledger, and the testimony of Samuel Pike. Enough to establish a conspiracy, perhaps, but not enough to prove Marchmont had ordered it. Mr. Wren was brought to the library under guard shortly before dusk. The steward entered, looking 20 years older than he had that morning. His coat was wet with rain, and mud stained the knees of his trousers. When he saw the altered coal ledger on the table, he stopped trying to appear confused. "How long?" Alistair asked. Wren lowered his eyes. 6 weeks, Your Grace." 6 weeks since what? "Since Lord Marchmont's men approached me." Alistair's anger was quieter now, which made it more dangerous. "You gave them access to my carriage house, my records and my seal." "I never gave them the seal, only the measurements from the repair invoice. And my wife's handwriting. They took letters from the household correspondence." Genevieve studied him. "Why did you help them?" Wren's face twisted. My son owes money to Marchmont's gaming house. More than I could repay in 10 lifetimes. Reed said the debt would disappear if I provided small pieces of information. Delivery schedules, copies of your signature, the location of the carriage keys. So you endangered every worker on those wagons to protect your son, Alistair said. I did not know Reed meant to cut the wheel pins. He told me they would delay the coal, nothing more. And the poisoned tea? Genevieve asked. I did not prepare it. Reed gave the packet to Clara and used my name. By the time I returned and discovered what he had done, he was already inside the house. Yet, you did not warn us. Wren looked toward the floor, because he said he would expose everything if I spoke. I would lose my position. My son would be imprisoned for debt. I thought if I remained silent, no one else would be harmed. Genevieve felt no sympathy for the excuse, only a weary recognition. Alistair had believed his silence would preserve order. Wren had believed his silence would protect his family. Both men had allowed danger to grow because truth threatened something they valued. Where is the missing page from my father's notebook? She asked. Reed took it to Marchmont's South Forge. They have already begun constructing a full-sized valve from the design. How soon can it be completed? 3 days. Perhaps 4. And when will Marchmont demonstrate it to Vance? Wren hesitated. Tomorrow evening, at the Stonehaven Manufacturing Council. He intends to accuse Iron Ridge of falsifying its production capacity, present the wagon wreck as proof of mismanagement, and offer his own forge as the only reliable replacement. The trap was larger than Genevieve had realized. Marchmont did not need to wait for Iron Ridge to miss a delivery. He intended to use the sabotage itself to have their contract revoked before production began. Alistair ordered Wren confined to his rooms under guard. The decision was merciful compared with immediate arrest, but not forgiving. You will testify before the council, he told the steward. You will name every instruction you carried out, every document you copied, and every payment offered to you. Your son's debt will be investigated separately. I will not allow Marchmont to use it to purchase your silence again. After Wren was taken away, Genevieve remained beside the library fire, looking at her father's notebook. The severed page made the book feel wounded. For years, it had been the only inheritance she truly valued. Proof that the hours she had spent beside Edmund Harcourt's drafting table had mattered. Now his work sat inside a rival forge where men intended to claim it as their own. We cannot stop Marchmont's demonstration by accusing him without the missing drawing, she said. Wren's testimony may establish access, but Marchmont will say his steward acted under pressure, or Reed acted alone. Alistair stood across the table from her. Then I will withdraw from the council and announce that Iron Ridge will not compete for Vance's contract until the investigation is complete. Genevieve looked up sharply. That gives Marchmont exactly what he wants. It protects you from a public accusation. No, it protects the dignity of your title from the possibility that we might lose. I am trying to prevent him from humiliating you before the county. This morning you tried to prevent me from humiliating you. Have we truly changed so little? He went still. If we appear at Stonehaven, without undeniable proof, Marchmont will present the forged letter, the damaged wagons, and the statement of a paid labourer. He will make you look reckless, dishonest, and dangerous. Then I will answer him, and if the council does not believe you, at least the words will be mine. Genevieve closed the notebook. I have spent 18 months being protected from rooms in which my future was decided. I will not accept another form of silence, merely because this one is spoken gently. Alistair looked toward the fire. When he answered, his voice had lost its defensive edge. You are right. The admission came without qualification. I am still attempting to choose for you, because choice has always been the form my authority takes. I mistook it for protection when it was often only control. Genevieve had waited 1.5 years to hear him name the truth, yet it did not dissolve the hurt as she once imagined it might. Recognition was not repair. It was merely the place from which repair could begin. What will you do differently? She asked. Alistair removed the Iron Ridge signet from his finger and placed it on the table between them. Tomorrow, before the council, I will state publicly that every technical decision concerning the Vance contract belongs to you. I will give you full authority over the foundry investigation and authenticate the forged seal myself. Genevieve stared at the ring. If the council rules against us, you could lose more than the contract. I know. Creditors may demand immediate payment. The estate could be forced to sell the western lands. I know that too. And you would still stand beside me? His eyes held hers. I should have stood beside you before standing there carried a price. I cannot undo that failure. I can only refuse to repeat it. They worked past midnight, comparing the altered ledger with earlier shipment records and reconstructing Marchmont's plan. Wren had provided the schedules. Reed had copied the valve design, damaged the model, and cut the wagon pins. The exhibition labourer had removed the physical evidence and returned in the stolen carriage to accuse Genevieve. Marchmont would present the final attack at Stonehaven. Yet one gap remained. They still lacked proof that Marchmont knew the valve came from Genevieve's notebook. Shortly after 1 in the morning, Genevieve found the answer, not in the stolen page, but in the pages still bound beside it. Her father never drew a final mechanism, only once. He developed designs through repeated variations, marking each experiment with a private system of dots along the lower border. The missing drawing contained an error, a deliberately reversed thread inside the auxiliary release housing. Edmund had corrected it on the following page, which Reed had failed to steal. If Marchmont built the stolen version exactly, the valve would appear functional at low pressure, but lock when the furnace reached a full industrial load. He will expose himself during the demonstration, Genevieve said. Alistair came around the table. Can it explode? Not if the pressure remains below the danger line, but Marchmont will increase the heat to prove the valve's efficiency. When the reverse thread locks, he will have only seconds to release the furnace manually. Then we warn the council before he ignites it. If we warn them, he replaces the thread and claims the correction was always his. Genevieve traced her father's dots with one finger. We must let him begin, force him to claim the design publicly, and then stop the test before anyone is harmed. That is a dangerous distance between proof and disaster, which is why I need access to the furnace before the demonstration. I can place a secondary release clamp on the outer housing. If the valve locks, I can vent the pressure safely. Alistair's expression showed immediate resistance, but he did not forbid her. Tell me what you need. The answer surprised them both. Genevieve looked at him across the scattered drawings, and for the first time, their marriage resembled what it might have been from the beginning. Not obedience, not indulgence, but partnership. A copper bypass tube, a calibrated gauge, and someone strong enough to hold the manual lever when I give the order. Alistair rolled up his sleeves. Then you have all three. At dawn, a sealed message arrived from Stonehaven. The council had accepted Marchmont's emergency petition. Iron Ridge's contract would be reviewed at 6 that evening. Genevieve's presence was formally required, not as the engineer whose invention had secured Vance's interest, but as the woman accused of falsifying safety inspections and endangering estate workers. Attached to the summons was a copy of Marchmont's proposed evidence. Genevieve read the first page, then handed it silently to Alistair. Marchmont had produced a witness who claimed to have seen her paying Reed inside the Oakenford pavilion. The witness was not the captured labourer, it was Clara, the young maid who had nearly been poisoned beside them. Alistair immediately called for her, but her room was empty. On the pillow lay a silver serpent ring and a note written in Clara's own hand. If I tell the truth, my mother dies. Genevieve read the note twice. The words were uneven, pressed so deeply into the paper that the nib had nearly torn through it. Clara had not written them calmly. Someone had stood close enough to watch every stroke. Where does her mother live? She asked. The housekeeper said Mrs. Hale occupied a cottage near the abandoned limestone quarry 2 miles south of Marchmont's Forge. She had been ill for several years and depended upon Clara's wages for medicine. Alistair ordered horses prepared, but Genevieve looked at the summons lying beside the silver ring. They had fewer than 9 hours before the Stonehaven hearing. Marchmont expected them to divide their attention between defending the contract and searching for Clara. If they all rode to the quarry, he might move the girl elsewhere. If they ignored the threat, Clara would be forced to condemn Genevieve publicly. Send the constable and 2 men Clara knows, Genevieve said. If she sees a group of Iron Ridge guards, she may believe we intend to arrest her. Tell them to secure her mother quietly and bring both women directly to Lord Vance's residence in Stonehaven. Alistair nodded, then turned to the housekeeper. Do it. There was no hesitation and no revision of Genevieve's instructions. Once the servants had gone, she examined the serpent ring. A narrow film of pale dust clung inside its coils. Limestone, Clara, or whoever had forced her to write the note, had placed the ring on the pillow after leaving the quarry. It might have been a plea for help, rather than evidence against her. She wants us to find her mother, Genevieve said, and perhaps to understand that Reed is still near the South Forge. Alistair looked toward the window, where the first grey light of morning had begun to spread over Iron Ridge. If Reed reaches Marchmont before the hearing, he will warn him that we know about the reverse thread. Reed does not know. I discovered it after he fled. Wren might. No, my father's correction system meant nothing to anyone, except me. Genevieve closed the notebook and tied it beneath her coat. For once, Marchmont's arrogance is working in our favor. He believes he stole a finished invention from a woman who merely inherited it. He will not imagine that I understand it well enough to recognize its flaw. By midday, they were traveling to Stonehaven with the copper bypass tube concealed beneath a rolled carpet in their carriage. Wren rode in a guarded coach behind them, while the captured exhibition labourer remained locked at Iron Ridge. Lord Vance had gone ahead to ensure Samuel's testimony was recorded by a magistrate before his condition worsened. The road passed in uneasy silence until Alistair noticed Genevieve flexing her left hand. The skin along her palm had blistered where she had handled the overheated miniature forge, and her shoulder had begun to ache from the blow against the account table. "You are injured," he said, not seriously. "You always say that after the danger has passed, because before it passes, the injury is rarely the most important problem." He reached for her hand, then stopped before touching it. The pause mattered. "May I?" Genevieve gave a small nod. Alistair removed her glove carefully and examined the burns. From the carriage cabinet, he took a clean cloth and a small jar of salve kept for travel injuries. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he spread the ointment across her palm. 18 months earlier, on the night of their wedding, he had kissed that same hand before leaving her alone in a room prepared for a marriage neither of them had chosen. Since then, they had inhabited the same house like two nations, maintaining a cautious peace. She knew his public voice, his formal habits, and the exact sound of his footsteps outside her study. She did not know what frightened him, what made him laugh when no one watched, or whether he had ever regretted the distance between them before today. "Why did my success at Oakenford anger you so deeply?" she asked. Alistair continued, wrapping the cloth around her palm. "Because Vance looked at you and saw within 10 minutes what I had failed to see in 18 months. The honesty unsettled her more than an excuse would have. That should have made you proud. It should have. Instead, it made me feel unnecessary." He secured the bandage and released her hand. "My father taught me that a duke remains valuable by being the most authoritative man in every room. When Vance dismissed my opinions and asked for yours, I believed I was losing control of the estate. What I was truly losing was the illusion that control and leadership were the same." Genevieve looked down at the white cloth around her palm. "And now? Now I understand that Iron Ridge nearly collapsed because everyone waited for me to possess answers I did not have." He met her eyes. "You had them. I should have opened the door instead of ordering you to change your clothes." She wanted to accept the apology, yet a part of her remained guarded. One day of courage could not outweigh 18 months of indifference. "I believe you mean that now," she said, "but remorse is easiest while we are united against an enemy. The test will come when my judgment contradicts yours, and there is no Marchmont to blame. Then I will have to prove it after today." Alistair did not ask her to forgive him. That restraint reached her more deeply than any declaration could have. The Stonehaven Manufacturing Council occupied a long stone building beside the canal. By the time their carriage arrived, the street was crowded with workers, merchants, and reporters. News of the wagon wreck and Genevieve's alleged involvement had travelled faster than they had. Some spectators called her name, others whispered as she passed in riding clothes, rather than the silk expected at a formal hearing. This time, Alistair did not suggest she change. He walked beside her, carrying the copper tube beneath his own coat. Inside the council hall, Marchmont stood before a raised furnace assembled on an iron demonstration platform. Its polished brass valve was nearly identical to the one Genevieve had designed. The sight struck her like theft made physical. Her father's proportions, her own regulating arm, and even the placement of the gauge had been copied. Only the reversed inner thread remained hidden. Marchmont greeted the council with practiced solemnity. "Gentlemen, I regret that we meet under such disturbing circumstances. 4 workers injured, valuable coal destroyed, and a foreign contract endangered by the unauthorized experiments of a woman untrained in industrial management. His gaze settled on Genevieve. Talent can be admirable. Ambition without discipline is dangerous. Alistair moved forward, but Genevieve touched his sleeve. This was her accusation to answer. The council chairman requested the evidence against her. Marchmont produced the copied letter found on the labourer, the altered coal ledger, and a signed statement from Clara claiming she had seen Genevieve meeting Reed before the exhibition. Clara herself was not present. The witness is afraid to face the Duchess, Marchmont explained. A convenient fear, Genevieve said, particularly when it prevents the council from asking whether her mother has been threatened. A stir passed through the room. Marchmont's expression did not change. You have no proof of such a threat. Genevieve placed Clara's note and the limestone-covered serpent ring on the evidence table. Then summon her and allow her to say so herself. The chairman examined the note but remained cautious. Until the maid is located. This establishes concern, not fact. Marchmont smiled faintly. He had chosen his timing well. The constable had not yet arrived with Clara or her mother. Genevieve would have to proceed without them. Alistair stepped before the council. There is another fact this room must hear before judgment begins. This morning, I ordered my wife to abandon the Oakenford exhibition because I considered her clothing unsuitable and her involvement in the foundry improper. My contempt was public. It gave whoever planned these crimes reason to believe I would accept evidence against her without examination. Genevieve watched surprise move through the hall. A duke did not usually confess his failures before merchants and workmen. Alistair removed his signet and placed it beside the counterfeit impression. I will not repeat that error. The seal upon the forged order is an imitation of mine. The rounded antler proves it. The handwriting attributed to the Duchess was traced backward, and the coal entry was added in newer ink. I ask the council to judge the evidence, not the prejudice I helped create. The admission cost him exactly as he had known it would. Several creditors began whispering together. One reporter wrote so quickly, his pen scratched audibly across the page. Marchmont seized the opening. A moving defense from a husband desperate to preserve both his marriage and his estate. But sentiment does not explain why the Duchess's experimental design resembles the valve my engineers have developed independently over the past year. Genevieve looked at the machine. Independently? Entirely. Then you will have no objection to stating that claim under the council's commercial oath. Marchmont's confidence flickered, but only for an instant. He placed his hand upon the council ledger. I swear that the pressure-regulating valve displayed here was designed within my forge, without the use of drawings, notebooks, or calculations belonging to Duchess Genevieve or her late father. The lie was now formal and public. Genevieve felt the balance shift. Then demonstrate it, she said. Marchmont ordered the furnace ignited. Coal caught beneath the chamber, and the first orange glow spread behind its iron grate. The pressure needle began climbing. Genevieve watched every movement of the regulator. At low heat, the stolen valve performed perfectly. The bellows opened and closed, drawing approving murmurs from the council. Marchmont raised the fuel feed. As you can see, the mechanism maintains steady airflow without manual labor. It is a significant advance over the decorative model presented yesterday by the Duchess. The needle passed 40 pounds, then 50. The reverse thread began tightening inside the auxiliary housing. Genevieve saw the regulating arm hesitate. Stop increasing the heat, she warned. Marchmont smiled. Concerned that my machine will succeed? Concerned that your theft will kill someone? The room erupted in whispers. Marchmont turned the fuel higher. At 60 pounds, the regulating arm locked. The bellows continued feeding the flame, but the release valve no longer responded. A low metallic groan moved through the furnace casing. Genevieve pulled the copper bypass tube from beneath Alistair's coat. Clear the platform. Marchmont blocked her path. You will not interfere with my demonstration. Your pressure valve is sealed backward. In less than 1 minute, the housing will rupture. He glanced at the gauge. For the first time, uncertainty entered his face. He tried the control lever. It did not move. The needle reached 70. Council members began backing away. Alistair climbed onto the platform beside Genevieve. Tell me what to do. She handed him the manual release bar. Hold this down when I attach the bypass. Do not let go, whatever happens. They moved toward the furnace together, but a gunshot exploded from the upper gallery. The copper tube flew from Genevieve's hands and rolled beneath the burning platform. Above them stood Silas Reed, smoke curling from his pistol. "No one touches that furnace," he shouted. "If Marchmont falls, Iron Ridge burns with him." Then he raised the pistol again and aimed directly at Alistair. Reed fired before anyone could reach the gallery stairs. Alistair turned toward Genevieve at the sound, and the movement saved his life. The ball tore through the shoulder of his coat, instead of striking his chest, spinning him against the furnace rail. Genevieve caught him before he fell onto the burning platform. "Are you hit?" Her hands moved across his shoulder, searching for blood. "Only grazed." He tried to straighten, but pain tightened his face. Above them, Reed was already reloading. The furnace groaned again, louder than before, and the pressure needle passed 80. The room had only seconds before the locked valve tore through its housing. Genevieve looked from the pistol in Reed's hand to the copper tube beneath the platform. She could not reach both Alistair and the bypass. "Get behind the furnace," she told him. "I am not leaving you." "Then do what I asked. Hold the manual lever." Alistair seized the iron bar with his uninjured arm and forced it downward. The mechanism resisted, but the slight movement slowed the rising needle. Genevieve dropped to the floor and crawled beneath the platform. Heat pressed against her face. The copper tube lay only a few feet away, but a line of burning coal had spilled between them. She wrapped her injured hand inside the edge of her coat and reached across the hot iron. Reed fired again. The ball struck the platform above her, showering sparks over her shoulders. Council guards reached the upper stairs, forcing him away from the rail. But he continued shooting toward the furnace as he retreated. Marchmont stood frozen near the evidence table, staring at the machine he had sworn was his own. "Help them!" Lord Vance shouted.